Hey there. Is your business slowing down, maybe changing direction, or even wrapping up? If so, you're probably wrestling with a big question. What on earth do you do about your GST registration? Well, today we're going to break down exactly how to cancel it correctly so you can focus on whatever's next. Figuring out if it's the right time to cancel, that's probably the first big question, right? And let's be real, this is a totally normal part of the business journey. Look, just because your trading activity changes, it doesn't mean you failed or anything like that. It just means your tax setup needs to change along with it. Think of it as just a bit of admin, not some big step backward. So, what are the actual rules here? Well, the IRD has a pretty clear framework. You've basically got to figure out which bucket you fall into. You have to cancel, you can choose to cancel, or, well, you can't cancel just yet. It pretty much boils down to two main situations: mandatory, which is when IRD says you have to do it, and voluntary, where it's your call. Let's dig into the mandatory one first. Okay, so for it to be mandatory, a couple of things need to be true. It's not just about stopping your trading. First, you have to have stopped your taxable activity, the main thing your business does, and you can't have any plans to kick off a new one within the next year. And listen, if that's you, the clock starts ticking fast. You've got exactly 21 days from when you stop that taxable activity to let IRD know and get your registration canceled. That's a hard deadline, so you really don't want to miss it. All right, now let's talk about the situation most people find themselves in: voluntary cancellation. You basically get the choice to cancel if you're pretty sure your turnover is going to dip below the threshold, or if you've just been filing nil returns for a while now. And that magic number is $60,000. If your turnover, that's your total sales, remember, before expenses, is looking like it'll be less than 60 grand in the next 12 months, you can choose to deregister. Okay, but hold on. There's a really important catch here that you need to know about. If you are still including GST in your prices when you bill customers, you cannot cancel. It doesn't matter if your turnover is under 60 grand. The second you charge GST, you're telling the IRD you need to be registered. Simple as that. Okay, so you figured it out and you're ready to cancel. So how do you actually do it? Well, the good news is the process itself is pretty simple, and the IRD has made it really easy. Hands down, the easiest way is through your MyIR account. You just log in, head over to your GST account, click on that little More option, and you'll see it right there: Cancel Account Registration. It's just a quick online form. Now, what if you can't use the online form for some reason? Don't worry, you're not stuck. You can also just send a secure message inside MyIR and explain what's up, or, you can go old school and just give the IRD a call. So once you've hit submit, you won't be left hanging. The IRD will get on it, and as long as they don't have any questions, you should get a confirmation in your inbox within about 5 working days saying, yep, you're officially canceled. Right? Listen up, because this next bit is probably the most important part of the whole process, and it's where people can get a little tripped up. Canceling your registration is not the end of the story. You absolutely positively have to file one last GST return. So what's a final GST return? Well, it's basically a return that covers that entire last taxable period. For example, let's say you file every 2 months and your period ends in September. If you cancel on, say, September 15th, your final return still needs to cover that whole period from August 1st all the way to September 30th. And this final return forces you to ask a really important question. Think about all your business assets: your work laptop, maybe a company vehicle, your tools. Are you planning on keeping any of that stuff for your own personal use now? And here's why that matters. The logic is, if you claimed GST back when you bought an asset for the business, the IRD kind of needs to get that GST back now that the asset is leaving the business for your personal use. Makes sense, right? So you have to pay GST on whatever it's worth today. And I know what you're thinking. Okay, so how on earth do I calculate that? Luckily, you don't have to guess. IRD gives you a specific formula. First, you got to figure out what the asset is worth right now. It's open market value. Then you just follow these super simple steps. And there it is. You take that current market value, you multiply it by 3, and then you divide that whole thing by 23. Whatever number you get, that's the GST amount you need to pop into your final return as a debit adjustment. Phew! Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here. So let's just nail down the key takeaways with a final checklist and talk about what happens next. All right, here it is, your 4-step plan. Step 1, Figure out if you must cancel or if you can cancel. 2. Send in your cancellation request. MyIR is your best bet. 3. File that final GST return. And 4, the big one. On that return, make sure you calculate and include the GST for any business assets you're keeping. And one last super important thing to remember. Going through this whole process is only about your GST status. It does not, I repeat, does not close your actual business. Your company can keep on trucking, you can keep being a sole trader, you'll just be doing it without being registered for GST. And that's it. Once that final return is filed and paid, the admin is done. You are totally free to focus on whatever's next for your business. So with this little task ticked off your list, what's your next big move?